Okay, so Oulton Park. Let's start at the beginning. So this track is much wetter than Monza was. So there's a couple of things that you need to take note of in driving this type of thing. So first things first, let's talk tire pressures. So tire pressures for wet tires, you're aiming for 30 psi. So where you'll normally aim for high 26s on dries, in wets 30 psi. That's your pressures that you're aiming for. Now, normally your brakes in the dry, you will run either brakes 1 or 2. I still prefer 2 always. However, this race is quite wet, severely wet. So it might be a good idea just to test brakes 3, because brakes 3 is the wet weather brakes. So I think it keeps its heat better, and it helps just to keep the tires a bit warmer so that they're not as skittish when you get to the corners. Then, normal tips for wet driving. ABS as low as possible, 1, at the most 2. The reason for that is you want to, and then also your brake bias, you move to the rear as far as you can, or as close to the rear as possible. This will give you the maximum braking power going into the corners. It'll also avoid the fronts locking up as you go into the corners, making it easier for you to go through them. So that's the main tips when it comes to the setup for wet weather. Driving style when it comes to wet weather, it's always good practice to avoid curbs as much as possible. And Oulton Park, and in this type of rain, is no exception. Keep away from curbs as much as possible, so that you don't spin. There are some of them that are okay, but you have to be extremely gentle with your inputs. Steering and pedals have to be very gentle. This is more a situation of sliding the car through the corner than driving it through the corner. So you have to get that rhythm right. So I'm going to take you through the track now, and then we'll do the pit stop at the end as well. I'm doing it in the Ferrari tonight for a special request, so we'll see what's what. So one thing that you need to be aware of, specifically on Oulton Park, it is a narrow track. At all costs, avoid the grass. At all costs. Even more so when it's wet. It's like driving on ice. So avoid the grass at all costs. So coming out of the final turn. So first things first. Here you just want to create a straight line for yourself. So go as close as possible to this inside line. And you want to position your car over on the left hand side. Now the brake markers and things I'm going to give you now is purely for the wet weather situation. Obviously in the dry it'll be completely different. Stay to the left. Now that don't rely on the boards, because anything can happen and they'll most probably be taken out. So it's important to get brake markers for yourself through other things that can't change throughout the race. So for turn 1, I actually use that orange board or that Marshall hut on the right hand side. That's my brake marker for turn 1. So when you get to turn 1, brake in a straight line, try and slow the car down. Avoid braking too much while turning, specifically in the wet. So you want to go down to about second gear, I think. So as you pass that thing on the right hand side, you're going to be on the brakes, and you're going to do a lot of coasting in the wet, because then the car's sort of stable. So when you get to this point, you want to bring the car in relatively late, so get it slowed down first. Don't make the mistake of turning and slowing the car down. Try and slow it down first, then only turning in. And you want to aim that you just put your right hand wheels just onto the curb on the inside. Now all the weight will already be on the left hand side, so it shouldn't have such a big issue. Don't take too much of the curb on the inside, otherwise it will bounce you. That's the last thing you want to have, specifically on the first corner. So you want to follow a line that's roughly in this direction, and you just want to get over that inside part, just like that. Don't go on the grass, otherwise it will bump you. And just feel the car underneath you. Don't go too wide on the exit here. Don't be too aggressive on the throttle as well. You can run all the way over here, that is still valid, but do not touch the white line with your inside wheels, otherwise it will invalidate your lap. But preferably you don't want to be on the outside here in the wet with too much throttle on, because it's extremely slippery and you can easily lose the rear. So get back on track as soon as possible to get the maximum amount of grip that you can. Then you just stay on the left hand side as you exit this corner. Now the turning point for me for this corner is just as I pass that board on the right hand side. Then I start turning in. I say start turning in, but just not turning in fully. It's just so that you can get the weight on the left hand side of the car. So as you pass that board on the inside, you start bringing the car in. And this is very important, this one. This braking zone does tend to catch a lot of people out. In the wet, I would recommend you brake before you go over this little bump in front. You all know what bump I'm talking about. There's a little dip right here by the Pirelli signs. There I'm on the crest, and here I go down that little bump right there. So I would definitely recommend that you start braking before you get to this little hump, round about here, so that your car's already in the braking mode as it goes over that little crest. If you're going to brake too late, your car's going to be light as you go over this bump. So if you only brake then, by the time it's back on track with full weight, the chances are very good that you're going to lose it. And if you brake after that, there's just not enough time to get you properly slowed down for this corner. So that's my advice for this one. Once again, brake in a straight line on the right hand side of the track. So you want to bring the car in relatively late so that you can be in a straight line when you apply the brakes. So you're going to be on the brakes down to second gear. And I find that by just braking towards the middle of the track, don't be on the outside, be sort of here in the middle. And as soon as you get to second gear, preferably, you just coast a little bit and you wait for the nose to come in. We'll always say wait for the nose. You'll feel the nose come in. Don't go onto the curb too much on the inside. Try to avoid that as far as possible, and gently on the throttle. If your car is set up properly with your TC, you should be able to power out nicely here. And then you can run relatively wide on this exit. It's not too bad, but once again, just try and avoid the curbs. So you'll end about here. Stay on the right hand side of the track, and now we're going to look for this little slip road coming up on the right hand side, the one right here, the little slip road right in front of the nose. So you give a little bit of a stab on the brakes just to slow the car down a bit. I tend to have my foot lightly on the brakes going through this corner. When I say lightly, it's just to keep the weight on the nose so that it pulls the car in. And once I can feel that I am going to make the corner, only then do I get back on the throttle. So you're going to brake, down gear 1 maybe, little bit, hold it on the brakes as you go through this corner. Stay wide as you are braking, and then only once you pass that slip road, then you bring it in. And you can bring it quite nice and tight through here. Just be careful not to overcook it on the exit. Gently on the throttle. But if your speed is fine, then you'll find that the car grips up quite nicely actually there. Don't go wide there, because this is like a graveyard on the right hand side. This is like a lot of dead bodies there every race. And then you just bring the car over to the left hand side. Now my brake marker for the hairpin is roughly between these two orange markers. That one there, and the one there with the guy with the green flag. So roughly between them, in the middle, somewhere there. You'll have to gauge it depending on your view. So if I have to make a guesstimate, it's sort of where these whitish or light panels on the barrier is. So roughly about here. This will be your brake marker. I do find it is a bit quicker to rather V this hairpin than to U it. Yeah, hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say there. So rather V this corner than so you brake in and then you have a late turn in so that you can cut back into the exit. Specifically with the TC, there's some nice camber here as well, helping you to keep you in. So just take note of that. I prefer first gear for this corner. I just find it helps to rotate the car around in the wet as well. So you're going to be braking down to first gear. You might run a little bit wide on this part and then you cut it back so that you get this sort of V line and then out to the outside. Now this corner coming up is probably the death of many. So you're going to start on the left hand side, and once you pass this orange marker on the right hand side, that's when you start bringing the car in, gently bringing it in. So by the time you get to here, you are lining up with the line going to the corner there on the right hand side. Your brake marker for this corner is roughly where this little pole is standing in front of me on the right hand side. Maybe a little bit before that for the Ferrari. I find the McLaren and the other cars might be a little bit better on the brakes. Now there's no other way to describe what I'm going to tell you now for this corner. This is a corner that you're going to have to dance it on your brakes through the corner. What does that mean? That means that you're going to be basically on the brakes throughout the corner until you exit. And you're going to use the brakes to let the car dance around, to make it turn. When we do a faster lap, and I get it right, you'll see exactly what I mean. So you're going to be on the brakes, you're going to bring it down to first gear. I find it, you get a better drive out of the corner in first gear, but you're only going to apply the throttle once you are through the chicane, you are ready to take the exit. So coming through here, you're going to brake just before this little pole, and you want to cut this curb. You have to cut this curb on the inside. So you're going to brake down to second gear, still braking, down to first gear. You're going to go over this curb, still on the brakes, lightly on the brakes, and then as you reach here, you're going to come off the brakes, and you'll feel the car dancing on the brakes. And only when you hit that apex do you get on the throttle. So this whole corner from that pole to where we do this last turn to the right is on the brakes. It's not full brakes. Obviously you slow the car down tremendously in the first part, and then you just hold it in the second part just to make it dance. The reason for that, it keeps the weight on the nose with the forces of the braking. So it helps you to sort of flick it around into that corner. Take some practice to get it right, and then you just power out on this side, across here, drift out to the right hand side, follow the shortest line, the quickest line, bring it over to the left again. Now we get ready for this braking marker. Now this one is slightly more difficult as well, because there's no real markers for you in the wet. You've got this orange marker on the left hand side, but that's way too early. And you've got the Marshall hut there next to the one board, that's somewhat too late. So you will have to find some reference mark. I'll give you mine. I roughly brake around about here. So it's just before the Marshall hut, so you'll have to find your own reference point. Once again, into this corner, you also want to sort of make it dance like we did through the chicane there. So you're going to be on the brakes while turning, although you're going to be lightly on the brakes, just to help that nose come in. Once again, go for first gear, just to it helps you rotate the car for one, and also gives you a nice little boost going out. So you're gonna brake in a straight line all the way, and then you start releasing the brakes as you turn in down to first gear. You can go over the inside a bit, give it a little squirt, then off the throttle again, not necessarily braking, just off the throttle, coast through this part of the corner, and then you get back on the throttle and swing it back to the left. Now this corner coming up you're going to be in second gear as you get here. It's just a coasting corner. You're just going to lift. And there's a specific point that I use. And if you see right in front of my nose, there's a little dip in the tar. Right there. Don't know if you can see it on screen. But when you're on track, you'll see it. Right in front of my nose, there's a little dip in the tar. So as soon as I get here, I lift off the throttle and I just coast. I just coast around. I just make sure I just don't go over too much on that curb. That little edge there will make you bounce. You just want to cut the inside just a little bit. And as soon as you are over that curb, you want to get on the throttle gently. Don't run too wide there because that curb there is very bumpy. And now we just follow the track as per normal. Over the crest. Now we're going to position our car to the right hand side. This is one of those corners that you sort of have to trust the car and trust yourself as well, and you have to be very smooth, because here you're going to have a situation where you're in the wet, you've got less grip, and if you're going to be too vigorous here, you will lose the car. Because what I want you to do is you have to remain on throttle, don't lift. So as soon as you get to this slip road here on the right hand side, you're going to start turning in, so that you can cut very close to the inside curb on the left corner in front here. So as soon as you get here, you're going to bring it over so that you follow this line here. Get as close as possible to the inside curb. And as soon as you are past it, just before this little straight part, just before this bend here, round about here, you'll see the corner makes a little kink to the right. This will be your brake marker. Bring it down 2 gears and then coast through these 2 corners. Don't be tempted to get on the throttle early, because you will not make it in the wet. So you want to stay on the left hand side. You're going to brake down to second gear. You're just going to lift and you're going to coast, keeping it tight on this one, keeping your steering nice and steady, and keeping it tight on this one. And only when you pass this apex here, that's when you get on the throttle. And once again, gently on the throttle, because you're going over a little crest, so the car will all of a sudden be light, so you don't want to be like full lock going in there, otherwise you will lose it. Gently on the throttle and gently on the steering. And then you just keep to the left for the last corner. Now the best brake marker I can find for this one is just as you go, there's a little hill before that white board. So just as you go up the little hill, so if I have to put my car there, so here we go up the hill, around about right here. Just as you go up that little hill, that's your brake marker for the last corner. Going down to second gear, you don't want to run wide here. You want to slow the car down first in a straight line before turning in, so that you can gently get on the throttle. Keeping in mind that once again, you're going to go over a little hill, so you don't want to have, you want to do your turning and your braking before you get there, so that you don't have to have a lot of steering on going through this final corner. We're going to brake down to second gear. You can even keep it on the brakes just a little bit. You want to follow this line as tight as possible. And once you get at that little, where the curb ends on the inside, you want to start getting on the throttle. And then just let it run out here. So, and then across the line. So in a nutshell, that is the lap. I'm going to try and do a fast one just with a commentary, but I also want to show you the pit entry as we go along. So the pit entry for this one, you will be on the right hand side, and your brake marker for that will be as you pass this second marker on the right hand side, orange marker. So it's sort of a weird entrance here. It's just a little kink to the left and all that type of things. So, and the pit entrance is just around the corner here. So you're going to be hard on the brakes here. Slow it down, slow it down, slow it down so you don't slide. And then in at the pits. Okay, let me just do a drive through just for the fun of it. And then we just do a quick lap. I think 46s, depending on which class you're driving. Michael, there's a nice time for you. That one. This Ferrari is so easy to drive, it's ridiculous. Gerrit, het vir jou die setup gestuur, nee? Ek het. Now you have to. Okay, so Stompie. Okay, there's no new people here for training. First timers, nee. Net only Stompie. Yeah, it does move.